They're gonna catch my checklist. That's a bad bet.
Welcome back to Never Fade, the NFT podcast. I'm your host, Faxx, and it's been a very interesting time in the NFT space. Last time we were checking in with you, we were talking about the metaverse and where we think things are going from there. Goodmonth ETH, he's still holding strong. He's still, navigating through the bear market like a champion. Good. How you doing today?
I'm good, Faxx. How you doing? Are you back from the pits of disillusionment? Are you back?
No, I think I've fallen further down into the pits. I've got new levels of disillusionment. I'm trying to stay strong, pick up the pieces here, but I'm excited because we got a very special guest today, and we got a lot to talk about. So I want to kind of go ahead and bring him on in here, and that's Board Elon Musk, a familiar name around the Opepens ecosystem. What's up, Board?
I just love hanging out with you guys, and I'm so happy to be here for the second time. How you doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. So for people who don't know, we've been hosting, Board and I, we've been hosting this Opepen chat on Friday mornings at 9:30 PST. Stop by and check that if you haven't. We do have a number of guest appearances by Goodmonth ETH, who's been pulling grails left and right and dropping alpha. So I think between Board and Good, we're going to pick these two collectors' brains on what's been going on inside the Opepens ecosystem. And today is the day that the Opepens, which was the collaboration between Luca Nets and Jack Butcher, dropped, which was a big hit with the community. So before we get into that, though, because that's kind of like a feel-good story, I'd like to lead off with a little bit of drama that went down with the infinity checks, if you guys don't mind. Kind of, I'm wearing the Degods shirt, so it's like the somber note today. So I'm going to start with some of the failures we've been dealing with in the space, including Season 3 fallout of Degods and infinity checks contract getting exploited. So for people who don't know,
Faxx can't let them just feel good, man. You can't let them just feel good. We're about ready for takeoff. We're gonna feel good, and we had to hit the FUD button.
You invite me into your home, and then you're just like, womp, womp, womp. Let's Debbie Downer the whole day.
People ask, you want the good news or the bad news? Usually they want the bad news first, right?
Look, I pay a lot of people a lot of money just to give me good news,
Dude, it's been all good news for you, but this is the story. So we've been covering the visualized value ecosystem. First the release of checks, then the release of Opepen. And there was a lot of excitement on this third release, which was going to be something different, which was infinity checks, where essentially you can mint these checks. It's generative art. It's fun. It's only 0.008 ETH. You deposit the ETH into the contract, and then you get this infinity check, which you can at any time degenerate and basically withdraw the ETH. So there wasn't going to be any secondary trading. It was going to be kind of like almost like a store of ETH, like visualized ETH is what Jaleel, the developer, called it, and was thinking almost you could trade infinity checks as ETH. It was kind of a cool concept, and it was going to highlight a lot of opportunities in the NFT space, like networking, community, art, and kind of remove the fiscal incentive other than just being long Ethereum, which a lot of us think is generally a good idea, not financial advice, but the contract was exploited. 40 Ethereum was lost. Jaleel covered these losses, took accountability, stood up immediately with transparency, said, hey, this is what happened. There's a bug. I'm going to address it. He addressed it. He refunded everybody's Ethereum. But, it was kind of sad because, I saw that he sold his CryptoPunk. And I'm assuming that it was to help cover those losses. And now he's coming out and he's saying, this is what I'm thinking in terms of next steps for infinity checks. And I don't know, I kind of have certain thoughts about it. So I wanted to get your guys' thoughts in general on infinity checks, kind of what you were thinking leading into it, what you thought about the situation with the exploit and how it was responded to, and kind of where you think things should go from here. And I want to start with you, Good. What's your take on infinity checks?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think the background you just didn't bring up is that this was the, originally, when Jack went to the Christie's auction, he is also doing a Web3 auction that coincided with that the next day. And he kind of said that, or he did say that everyone who bid on the auction, also, I think, did you take the alpha piece there, board, of that Web3 auction? I know you couldn't participate in the Sotheby's one for personal preference.
Yeah, the decentralized one, I bid on the Fire Alpha, so that's one of 4, and I still hold that. I don't have the physical component to it, but I know it's ready for pickup if I want it, yeah.
Yeah. So in this auction, basically everyone who bid got an opportunity to get an airdrop. And I think at the time, Jack and team, wanted to incentivize people to get in on the auction and see some action. But I think, it wasn't very long into the auction where we saw people were having a ton of fun bidding for these checks, and they didn't really need that incentive. So I got probably it would require a long episode to go through all these thoughts of infinity checks. I could make it really short. I don't think they needed to reward the people who bid. Like, I actually would have liked to see them kind of backtrack on that commitment and say, hey, we said we were going to airdrop something, but it doesn't fit our ethos. And, instead we're just going to, not do that. I think people would have been okay with that. They could have even also just given the 0.008 back to the people who did bid and didn't win. Because there was nobody who bid and got stuck with, the asset based on that bid incentive. So this one's just, it's hard for me to swallow on so many levels. Like, I had actually tweeted at Jack when he said, been thinking about this, and airdrop doesn't make sense, which I agreed with because of just the kind of delivery mechanisms and supply mechanisms, and it just didn't feel like it had any weight to it, which I really agreed with. But then I felt like chasing this infinity mechanism was just a lot of extra work for something that, I don't think the people really needed. But, I think they had a lot of fun with it. Faxx, you played with it a lot. I personally never was going to participate in it. I kind of have this ethos about, like, not storing ETH in things that aren't wallets. So, like, storing ETH in smart contracts, like, unless it's a DeFi application that has audits and has a large TVL to it, I'm not going to typically participate in it. So I don't have too much to say on the experience, but I'm gutted that Jaleel felt the need to take the hit on it. And, we'll be trying to do something that Jaleel wouldn't do. And, that's like what Jaleel has said in his words for the Threadition mint, to try to help him out, because I think he's helped us all out immensely. So I don't think he deserves this 40 ETH hit. And to be very clear, he also, wasn't on the hook for the 40 ETH. He did it on a personal endeavor to pay it back for it on his own integrity basis. But yeah, what are your thoughts, Board?
Yeah, I think it was in a way like performance art, this idea of you can put money into an NFT and then extract it at any point and get your money back. And the whole idea is this is not something you trade or you speculate on. It lives in infinity and the value is always the same. And I love the idea of it. I think it's a testament to the Visualized Value team and Jaleel specifically that, 40 ETH even was put into these contracts. That's a lot of money considering these things were minting for 0.008, a pretty small amount. And that's really, I think, because Jaleel's proven himself to be like S tier level coder. He's a really strong engineer, but inevitably every engineer, sometimes will either move too quickly or try to create something that has never been built. And there's holes. And unfortunately, we walk amongst villains who want to exploit things and get money very easily. I'm kind of with you, Goodmonth. I don't love the idea of locking up ETH into really anything. I've been a victim of hacks myself on DeFi protocols, which are, even more complicated. So I've been burned several times by that. And so I put like $50 into infinity checks, but I wasn't going to really go any further than that. But yeah, ultimately, I agree. I don't think Jaleel personally should have to bear the brunt of it. I think that I'm guessing he was never asked to do that. I think he just did it because if you're a software engineer, you are really proud of the work that you've done. I mean, this is why GitHub and all these like public repositories have so much open source code, because people who write code, they want to have a trace of their history, like live forever, and they want to make sure that there's no blemishes on their record. And in a way, I think this is Jaleel kind of trying to cleanse this, what is in his mind a blemish. I don't think anybody in our community faults him for it. We all know that he was trying to do something really special and unique. And I'd like to think that, in the grand scheme of things, the universe is going to pay him back tenfold for this investment he's made to cover his tracks, and hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd also just like encourage them next time to just maybe charge the 0.008, and have it go to a VV wallet versus having it stored. I feel like they just didn't want to have any type of cost event for this, but the experience alone, Faxx, I'd like to hear from you and the experience of playing with Infinity Checks, because it sounds like you had fun with it. And if you had fun doing it, sounds like maybe you would have been okay just sending the 0.008 directly to a VV wallet versus having it stored.
Yeah, for sure. Like I checked it out. The user interface was dope. You roll a check, you can re-roll. The other part of it was, if you did participate in the bidding of the auction, we were given a 7-day window where you could kind of just re-roll for free. So like, for example, I had 5 based on the bidding that I did. So I was able to kind of like re-roll those for free until I found the one that I wanted. And then that was going to get airdropped, later to my wallet. In the meantime, I went to the live contract and was minting these checks, tried generating them, tried degenerating them. It was cool, man. The art was dope. It was fire. The experience was nice. It was all working. I ended up doing about 19 of these things that were paid. And then basically the next day or so, this exploit happened. And, the same day that the bug was identified and the exploit happened, he refunded everybody and set out a spreadsheet, and I checked in, I, got my refunds and all that. And that was kind of it. So for me, I liked the idea because I thought it was another way, kind of like the Threadition, to grow the network, grow the visualized value community in a non kind of financial incentivized way. So from a marketing and branding and experiential growth opportunity idea and concept, I thought it was awesome. But I think philosophically, ultimately, this is the universe saying, infinity is too great of a concept to deposit into a smart contract. And Jaleel put out this thread about kind of his ideas for next steps. And there is this contract that, the V1 contract, and he was saying something about maybe it could be modified and there could be a website where people could just for free roll infinity checks out. And so I thought that was a pretty cool idea. What I suggested is to do that, use that broken contract just to generate the art, no financial aspects. And then let people play with it. And then if they generate one that they really like, and they're like, oh, I want to have the NFT of this, then set up some mechanism where they can mint that NFT at a price of 0.008 and just have it go to the team. Yeah,
like a QQL situation with Tyler Hobbs. You can roll your QQL if you have a pass as many times as you want, and then you mint it to your token when you want to do that. So I think that'd be good. I think one of the phenomenons that happened in this is that, in Web3 specifically, I won't even talk about Web2 security, but in Web3 specifically, when an incident like this happens, everybody comes out of the woodwork and they give their shoulda, coulda, wouldas. and they tend to kick someone when they're down. But nobody did that within the Opepen community. So that validates that, just the attributes of the community that we know we have within the Opepen and VV community. It's just truly built different. And then the other thing is like, actually what made people feel worse than the incident was this idea. And really, frankly, it's none of our business, but is this idea that Jaleel sold his punk to take the hit, that he wasn't asked to take the hit. He just felt he needed to. Like, that actually upset a lot of people. Like in a lot of Opepen chats, people were gutted about that, and DMs were swirling about how to help. I thought that was fascinating. That's a pretty strong signal of how deeply emotionally connected this community is. I'd love to get Board's reaction on that. As someone who's, I kind of look at Board as the grandfather of the patriarch of this community that's brought us together. So yeah, I'd love your thoughts on that, Board.
Yeah, it left a bad taste in my mouth as well. I think he did this 100% out of his own volition. It was voluntary. I just can't imagine that anyone asked him to do it. And to be honest, I think if I were in his shoes, I might have done the same. It's like, what's that Game of Thrones expression? A Lannister always pays his debts. I think Jaleel just doesn't want that weight on his shoulders. And he did this. And, a lot of people in the community were starting to like come up with ideas on like starting a fund or like creating projects to fund Jaleel. And it's tough. Like when you're somebody who's super humble, as Jaleel is, you don't necessarily like the idea of someone bailing you out or other people donating money to you. And I think he just did something to clear the tab, clear the plate. What comes next, we'll see. But I'm sure, much like you guys, if V2 of Infinity Checks comes along and the money is just used to go to VV to pay back this difference, I'm in. I'll definitely mint a bunch and let the money go that way. I never really wanted any of the money back from these things anyway. So I hope that that's agreeable for the rest of the community.
Yes, I'm glad I could, raise that issue with you guys. I know it's kind of an uncomfortable one, difficult to talk about, but we don't dance around the hard issues around here, And Jaleel, he came on that Opepen Spaces that Friday. He filled us in. Mad respect to that guy. And to your guys' point, I think the visualized value community, like as we suspected, is really like a well-natured, well-intentioned group. And I was appreciative of the overall response from everybody. So, with that, I'd like to pivot on to another topic here. When Board first came on the show, this is Board's second appearance, and we invited Board the first time around because he was the largest holder of Opepen NFTs at that time. And currently he is still the largest holder of Opepen NFTs. And this was a good spot to be in this week. Why? Because it was announced that Set 011, Set 11 was a collaboration between Jack Butcher and Luca Nets.
The ice cold birds.
The Pengoos came to play, and it was kind of wild because Luca hopped onto this Opepen Spaces. He was excited, man. He was so fired up to work with Jack. He was so fired up to do this. And one thing that came out of his mouth, the lead penguin was like, "Oh, these are fine art penguins." And he started to you could hear the wheels turning about like bringing these to physical form in some kind of like fine merchandising way, which is his specialty, is physical merchandise. So this was super exciting. Probably one of like this was like another cultural phenomenon. It's like another cultural phenomenon. The timeline goes wild. Everybody's fired up to get these penguins. And today, this morning of the recording, was the day that it was dropped. And Board Elon Musk swinging around the big bags of Opepen Max opting in, spiked 6. Do I have that right, Board? 6 Opepengs?
6 Opepengs is correct. And I restrained myself. Jaleel and team, they allowed you to set a maximum for how much you could win in each edition. And I wanted to be a good neighbor. and give everybody a fair shot. So I cut it off. I opted in so that I could win up to 20. I ended up winning 6, and I was really happy. And there was only one that I really wanted, and that was the neon green, the obnoxious neon green penguin. And I got it. And honestly, I haven't won a raffle. I haven't won like a raffle or anything in my life. So this felt really good. The rest are cool. I'll, trade them, sell them, whatever. But I wanted that neon green. He is at home. He will forever be in his home. And I'm super happy about it. I mean, this was a cool collab. Like I really respect Luca Netz so much. He bought Pudgy Penguins after they had some challenges. And he's one of the few like NFT founders that has actually made money outside of selling more NFTs, like creating a physical toy line, selling it on Amazon. And he's young. I mean, I've met him in person one time. He is like a young, driven guy, and I was really impressed with him. And to see, Pudgy Penguins then be the first like collaborative NFT project with Opepen was awesome. And the art is incredible. Like no disrespect to the Pudgy community, but I think the Opepen Pudgies kind of look better than the OG. Just my opinion. I know not everyone's going to agree with it, but they are super cool. And I'm really curious now to see what the next collab is going to be, because I think the bar got set super high.
I mean, it's said that these cold birds fly private. I mean, that was what resonated in the Opepen chat on Friday, that these things board their own bird. They're that special of a bird. And I feel it, man. Like I think that what we watched in that Twitter Spaces with Luca talking, we were really watching his mind start to unfold and get a little taste of what it's like to have a creative director operate on your IP. That's the sense that I got as we were sitting in that Twitter Spaces, where, Luca was literally taken back, I think, by the work that Jack and team put into, his IP, which is the Pengus, the Pudgy Penguins. And I think we just witnessed one of the first, transparent creative director partnerships in the NFT space. And knowing Luca Netz, as you mentioned, board with this motivation, is not going to be the last. I think that's facts. What do you think, board? I want to go back to talking about Luca from your perspective, especially since you're holding one of the most ice cold neon green things on the Twitterverse right now. What do you think? Oh, dude. By the way, what's it feel like? What's it feel like to like go into a 50-50 raffle, have, a good majority of not majority, but have a good grip of tickets and see 80 things and be like, that's the one that I want out of all 80 and spiking it? How's that feel?
The previous week, I bought a Powerball, Mega Millions, whatever ticket, didn't win. And then I did get the penguin I wanted. So I feel like 1 out of 2, pretty good. And the odds were basically the same.
Can I ask, did you have your trade weapons ready to go after that green? Like, if you didn't spike that green penguin, what were you going to trade for it?
All right, like full transparency, I definitely would have done a 2-for-1 deal to get it. I absolutely needed it. And I'm glad that didn't have to happen, but yeah. And like, I think
two pengus for that penguin.
I would have done 2 pengus for that one. Yeah. And I mean, like I tweeted something today about this idea that neon green, just as the soul color, has really become kind of my brand ethos. Like I've changed my PFP so many times, and I'm operating as this pseudonymous character. My face doesn't show. So for me, like this idea of building a collection and continuing to like build this lore of digital artifacts that are neon green is really important. So like anytime Opepen, or really like any collection that I love, has something with a neon green touch, like I'm going to try to get it, which I probably shouldn't say publicly, but
yeah.
Here we are.
You're gonna have the Board Elon secondary trade market going wild.
Machi's gonna go buy 1,000 neon green NFTs now and try to sell them to me.
Oh boy! Well, you originally purchased the neon green Series 1 off the secondary market, like right before Opepen popped off the charts, and you paid about 10 Ethereum, if I'm not mistaken, for that, before the floor on O1's like, doubled plus. So in your mind, this green Pengu was almost worth about the same, because we're seeing these secondary sales today around 5 ETH is like what these the market is appraising these things are at. So if you were willing to give up two, in your mind, it was like worth like almost 10 Ethereum. So that's pretty interesting. How do you compare the Series 1 to the Pengu in your mind for the brand in general, board?
I think the Pengus are basically the equivalent of the Series 1s in terms of this next chapter. So Jack has talked a lot about like every set of 10 Opepen potentially is kind of its own like micro theme. And so the first 10 sets, we saw a lot of stuff designed by the visualized value team, and it has this core minimalist, Opepen style. If the next 10, if sets 11 through 20 end up being collabs with other groups, then I think the Penguins are kind of like the Series 1, right, of that next chapter. Super slick, super clean. So I think they're going to be very coveted. And, you guys know, like the Pudgy Penguin community is really boisterous and active. And I think most of them haven't even figured out this thing happened. And like once they realize there's only 80 of these Pengus around, and that these are like, fine art in the words of their founder, I think there's going to be a lot of interest around them.
Yeah, good. Why do you think that these things are selling for more than an actual Pudgy Penguin from the collection?
I mean, they're the most beautiful things I've seen that represent a penguin ever. I missed out on the Pudgy buys. I wasn't into the Pudgies. I never was. And then, when Luca bought the Pudgies over, there's a lot of drama with the Pudgy Penguins when they came out. If you all remember, there was a lot of drama of the original founder, and who was buying and if it was genuine. We won't go into that because that's just past relics. But when Luca bought them over, that's when I started getting interested, and like I thought they were cute, and I think that's when it really resonated with me that like cute things scale really well on the internet. Cute really works, and I've never really bought a lot of things, or I've never really bought cartoons over 3 ETH, so I wasn't gonna pay 4, 5, 6 for one. But I knew they had the attention, they had the community, they had the network. So as soon as this dropped and seeing Jack's flair on it, they're ice cold. And the fact, you compare this to Degods a little bit, compare this to the Degods Bitcoin ordinals that popped off. That's kind of like their fine art collection, even though it's the same art, but it's on a different chain. Those are regarded as fine art for different reasons, but it's kind of their like high class, smaller collection. And I think this is an exact replica of that in regards to how it can be looked at when compared to the original Penguin community.
So let me ask both of you guys like one more question before we move on to the next topic. So if the Opepen, the Jack Butcher designed Pengus are fine art, and they were brought to life as physical merchandise in high fashion or otherwise, what physical merchandise would you bring that Pengu to life? I'm going to go first to you, Board.
I mean, I got to go with like winter wear, fleece jackets, overcoats, stuff that you would wear in the North Pole when you're visiting the Pengus. By the way, I trigger so many people every time I say the penguins live in the North Pole, because this is not actually true. But yeah, I think winter wear. That's my answer.
Winter wear. What about you, Kat? Where do you see it?
The glasses were circulating before this drop. Now they need to happen. Like I just think that's a no-brainer. Like the shades need to come fast, right? And it's they're built for the South African penguins, and wearing those shades, that just counters the North Pole comment. But yeah, I mean, I think the glasses got to come. But winter gear, sure. I'm not an atomic layer guy, so would I buy a Pudgy if it's Board's Pudgy? And yeah, sure, maybe just to stare at the neon green and just the odds and that he spiked the dream. the Dream Greeno.
For those listening at home, I just want to point out that Good's got like a wall full of memorabilia behind him, including like a giant neon ape, but he's not into atoms at all.
I've never looked behind me.
Yeah, so I was thinking like to make it like a watch face, maybe like that one of one IC penguin, like a Rolex or something like that. But with that, like I want to move into another topic that I think there's potentially like a lot of discussion to be had, and that is season 3 of Degods. There was
hold
a lot
up,
of
Faxx. Before we hit the other FUD bomb, Board, Luca Nets here. I asked a question. It wasn't a really well put together question, but on those Opepens spaces, when you were hearing Luca Nets talk about this, what do you think is going through his head? Like, what's going to come next out of this for Luca?
I think that like everything that he puts out now, he's thinking about physical products or events. I think that's his jam. And he wants to I think he wants to gauge the reaction of our community, of his own community, and see where this could go. But I have to believe that he's brainstorming that. That said, I think Jack has publicly talked about not necessarily wanting to push Opepen into the physical space, into the atomic level. So there might be some compromise there. It could go nowhere and it's just like a cool little experiment and that's the end of it. But it was clear to me just hearing him talk on the space that he's a big admirer of Jack. There could be future collaborations with like completely different art in the works. It's hard to say, but I definitely hope that those two guys work together because they have really interesting complementary skills. I almost think about it as like Steve Jobs and Joni Ive. Like, Luca's kind of the brash Steve Jobs. He thinks of really cool ideas. He brings things to market. Jack's got that like very precise, methodical Joni Ive's design element. So I think putting them together, especially because one really has like this whimsical, cute brand, and the other has kind of this like cool, modest, brand. Just like seeing what those two pieces of the pie or pieces of a puzzle could create together is interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a great take.
Good. Yeah, I know you wouldn't normally ask a question like that unless you had been stewing on some ideas in your mind. So what's your thoughts on it, Good?
Well, I mean, I think that's a fire take. I think that was really interesting to me on that Opepen Spaces was how Lucas said just outright, like, I mean, this is going to come off hubris the way I paraphrase him. It didn't sound like that in the Spaces, but Luca was like, I know how to get pudgy penguins in the hands, and I know how to get physical goods or goods in the hands of people that matter, and they will tell people that those items matter. It was a little bit, I was a little blown back to hear that from him because it just was so straightforward, but it was really the first time that I was like, that's Luca Nets. Like, I'd watched his building in public videos, I've heard him on Spaces, but he just said in one sentence right there that I think was like a boiled down sentence of why what his strengths are and why he's a powerhouse. And so, I mean, I think that he's going to be involved with Opepen from here on out outside of just Pudgy. I mean, I know he needs to focus on Pudgy, but I think he's going to probably try to get, Opepen reveals on the atomic level, on the atomic layer, and or partnerships feeding through Jack to put Opepen in the hands of people that can, that in Luca's words, matter.
Yeah, I was just going to add also like at a high level, what I've been kind of stewing on and a little worried about is if this is the start, if the Pudgies were the start of a series of 10 collaborations, and those collaborations happen to be with other NFT projects or PFP projects, I'm honestly like racking my brain to think of 10 that I feel like would be good enough to qualify, right? Because this is timeless. Like if this project lasts for years and years, I know Good, you talked about like knocking out 200 releases before the end of the year, but like I'm still of the opinion that it's going to take a while. And like, if they work with a project, if they release a set of 80 Opepen with a PFP now, and a year from now, that PFP project is dead or gone or everyone hates it, or if it was a rug, it kind of like leaves a stain on Opepen to some degree. So, I constantly am thinking about these past few days, like who is Jack going to want to work with that's a good fit? Is it going to be open to like art projects? Is it just going to be PFPs? It's a tough job, because if you ask me to pick 10 right now, I mean, if I'm looking at the top 50 projects, I would struggle to give you 10 that I would feel comfortable with.
Well, and one hell of a quarter to have that statement too, because, we've seen things that, we've seen a couple projects that we thought would probably be around at least 2-3 years from now. And there's question marks on that right now. So agreed, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? Is like, that's where we are in the space right now, where you think of PFP projects and you shudder because you think, oh, like, some of them are going to be dead and hate it. Not just dead, but hate it because they're dead, because people lost money or whatever. Like, that's the sentiment around the PFP market right now, which is, I think it speaks volumes that that's just kind of like a natural subconscious kind of concern that you have. So that does bring us to this next topic, right? So let me back up on this. The beginning of the year, okay? Actually,
he's backing up the FUD truck.
On Christmas of 2022, Frank Degods announced that Degods were going to move from Solana to Ethereum, and Utes were going to move from from Solana to Polygon. A lot of FUD, a lot of discussion. We started talking about it on the Never Fade podcast. At this time, Solana was in the tank. It had touched down, I think, to its lows around $8. Goodmonth was like, this is a spot to buy Solana. Solana's not going anywhere. We're putting 2 and 2 together, and we're thinking, Degods moving to Ethereum is a bullish opportunity for that, because there's more liquidity on the Ethereum chain. There's more high net worth collectors, all of those reasons. There's more visibility to the broader NFT community. And so at that point in time, I know both of us, we started to buy some Degods and get into it. And, from that point, experience like a pretty positive run up, right? Run up. Solana ran up, leading into demigration, which happened in March, which was the movement of the migration of the Degods from Solana onto Ethereum. Upon the migration, the floor, because at first there was very few coming along, the first couple were selling over 10 Ethereum. There was 11, 12 ETH Ethereum sales. Then they kind of like settled it under 9 ETH. Then there was like some pullbacks. Long story short, we got into this hype about season 3, this hype cycle about season 3. And then there was one delay. And then there was 2 delays. And the pressure cooker was just building up until Frank released a podcast episode, like a 2-hour podcast episode with Mark Coulter, a DGod community member that he's close with down in LA. And I listened to this. And, on this podcast, Frank, he was always like really amazing at articulating what he's thinking, articulating complicated concepts. He kept saying specific language like, this is going to blow your minds. This is going to blow your minds. And so it was almost like this whole thing with the delays and with this type of language, like it got a little too hyped. It got a little overcooked.
Faxx, not to mention, like, speaking of overcooked, like they put out content of Frank and team showing Mark Coulter and other people the art. And their reactions, I'm not going to lie, it was genius. I mean, seeing their reactions freak out about the art, like, it did give me FOMO. Because I was like, if you're a community member and you're going to put your reaction on air like that, and you're not going to show your community the art, that's like biggest trust signal you could do, right? You're not giving the elements of surprise away, but you're bringing people in from the community to get their reaction. You're doing a reaction video, and that just is bullish, like across the board. And I actually caught a Twitter space where Mark Coulter was like, he kind of had this mention when they were reviewing the downgrade. It just hit live, like the Twitter TLs, and he kind of had this caveat like, okay, that must be the art I saw. Like, it was kind of like this, like, Mark Coulter's saying, like, I got rugged a bit on my reaction for what I reacted and the community bought. So there was some irons moving in that fire that I think it led to this crucial.
Yeah. So just kind of like filling in the rest of what happened here. They said that they were going to do the release of season 3 on August 9th. August 9th comes around. Everyone's waiting. The hype is, building. But at the same time, I think there was a lot of people that thought this was going to be like a sell the news event. So there was actually like a sell off, like leading into that, and then kind of like a rebound. And me personally, like during this time, because so many people were saying like, oh, like, this is going to be sell the news, like just, don't get caught up on it. I was starting to think about like, everybody thinks this is going to dump. And I'm like, when everybody thinks it's going to dump, it's probably not going to dump. Like I'm like a contrarian, like, better, right? And so I ended up getting like totally like burned on this because I liquidated a D-God. And then I'm like, this is great. Look at all these tools. We got Blur, we got Blend. I'm just going to like spread this out into multiple D-Gods and just like play for like max exposure into this ridiculous event. And so of course, like what happens is they did this art preview and they said like muted luxury, and they showed the art, a preview of the art, and the community didn't like it. I don't know, like the community was just like down on it, and the floor price started dumping. Everybody was fighting. They were saying this is too simple. This isn't like good. Basically just giving Frank a hard time, yelling at the team, crazy NFT investors, yelling at founders. This is where we're at. And so then they like pivot. They pivot and they're like, no, we got the whiteboard out, processing the fund, doing our thing. We're going to pivot.
Real quick on that whiteboard picture, what was happening on step 3 is like step 1, like collect all FUD. Step 2 is process the FUD. Does anyone know what was happening on that little, like, the tree that was happening on the third point? Is that not? No one.
I didn't see it. I didn't see it. What did you see, Good? What was happening?
It was the picture of the whiteboard. His first step was capture all the FUD. Second step was process the FUD. And then the third step just had this 3, like a pronged tree. I just was like, the minute I saw step 3, I was like, this isn't good. Because I don't know what this step 3 means. But I thought I was missing something.
I think it was pick one of the other arts that they apparently had prepared. So
okay.
Frank's saying like they had like did like 5 different versions of this. So I think that they're getting in their own heads. They're getting in their own ways. They're like overthinking this whole thing. And it's just, you've had this criticism of Frank Good where you said, the thing is like it's tech. Like you got to ship. You can't just like keep pulling back. You can't keep pulling back. And so I think that's what might have happened here. So needless to say, they pivoted. They brought out this other art. It was much better received. A lot of people were like excited about it. The timeline blew up. I was bitten by it. And now I'm thinking, well, before it was 10 ETH and now it's like 6.5 ETH, that's a lot of downside baked in. And I got this like one that I thought was like kind of funny because it looks like Captain America's got like a blue shirt, like a red headband. It's like over the top ridiculous. It looks like a meme out of a comic book. So anyways, and also Board was bitten by this along the way. So Board, you got your first D-Gon like right before the precipitous drop that we experienced in the last 24 hours. So let me ask you, why did you decide to get a D-Gon? What was your thought process?
So for me, it's kind of like giving Frank a chance. I have to be honest, like, before last week, to me, Frank was just kind of like not necessarily appealing as like a founder that I want to invest in. Kind of bro-y, doing shoeies. The whole culture was like a little bit trying to be like cooler than you are. And that's fine. Like every culture has its own vibe, and that just wasn't my particular vibe. There's nothing wrong with it. I think the way that he handled himself and the criticism and just people like dumping on him, to me, was like watching a guy in a matter of like 3 days become an adult. And I mean that like not in sort of a snooty way, but just like, I think he's actually a very astute, like mature dude who has worked in tech, who knows how the world works. And it was almost like he was revealing more of his true self, and he was handling himself in a really responsible way. He was listening, he was responding, he was putting himself out there. And so I was like, okay, you know what? I respect someone a lot more about how they handle things in times of war versus times of peace. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to buy a DeGod, and I'm going to show them that I'm supporting, their community, and I want to see what they do. And I think it's a tough battle to climb, because like the Web3 space is all about momentum, and the momentum right now is going downhill. And so they have to fight against that. And ultimately they're running a company where people, the customers, right, of Degods are buying products, not from Degods, not from Frank, they're buying it from other people, and they're buying it for a lot of money. And it's almost like an impossible position for Frank to be in. So they're trying to do everything they possibly can to appease this avalanche of sort of missed expectations. And I think it's going to be tough, and I think it's just going to take time. I think right now what you're witnessing is a reset, and this reset's probably going to take 3 to 6 months. And hopefully, much like Azuki, they can be reborn with a much stronger, more quality group of community members and owners who understand like the long-term vision of this project. I think they honestly had to sort of wash a bunch of traders and degens out of their space. And I think that's happening, and I think they're going to come out better for it. So everything I see from Frank is great. And even though I'm not necessarily going to be like a hardcore member of the Degods community, I felt like it was worth buying one. Of course, it's down 30% since I made the decision. So, classic think I'm buying at the bottom. It was not, in fact, the bottom, but I'm going long term. I'm going to hold it for a while. We'll see where it goes. And yeah, I'm rooting for Frank. I hope that he's able to turn this around. And I think that the most important piece for me to hear was like the hype meta is over. I personally think the hype meta never existed in the first place. Like every major luxury brand, every company that's been around for 50 plus years, they do not hype. They invite people to hear the news, to come see their press release, their events, whatever it is, and then they show people what they've created. If you hype things too much, you will just simply never meet expectations. And I think that they learned it the hard way. So hopefully moving forward, it's all just like product delivery, and where the price nets out, I mean, it is what it is.
It's a great take. I think I totally agree about the hype. The fact that they actually were able to create hype in a bear market is impressive, because a lot of hype has gone out the back door during this bear market. So the fact that they did have it, I think, was kind of something to pay attention to. And I agree with you about growing up in these moments. Like Frank got smashed in the teeth, and he showed up for it. He wanted to do something about it, and he wanted to make it right. I think one of the really interesting things about Degods that spiked my interest early on was that they had this edge to them. The community, facilitated by Frank, had this edge to them that there might possibly be something going on there that the majority didn't understand. And I was really attracted to that, because it felt like, kind of Bored Ape days where, a lot of people just didn't get it. A lot of people didn't understand what was happening. And I know in moments like that, that's when you can really kind of take off and create culture. And when you have culture wrapped around something, it's, you become an enigma. And so that's what I was always most interested in. But it just was like one of the things that's always kind of pained me about the Degods community, not the community. The community is great, but the execution risk that comes with the Degods community is that I just wanted to see that culture driven versus put on a billboard. It was like I feel like there's been a lot of ground that's been lost in the last 9 months where there could have been just more acts of driving the culture versus waving the flag of the culture. And the bear market is where we kind of need that culture to be driven. So it's it's tough to see. Like Frank is young. Like he's never seen a bear market in the crypto space, from my understanding, given his age. It's tough. And I think for the people who've been in crypto for, 8 to 9 years, they've seen 3 different bear markets come in the crypto cycle. So being 24, having this pressure of community and kind of going through your first bear market is just, I think it's wild pressure. So I hope that they just hit the whiteboard and reinvent themselves from this point forward and find the bottom to bounce off of. But how you feeling, Faxx?
Well, there's more to it too. So it's like they had this grant that they got from Polygon to take Utes onto Polygon. And a lot of those holders were disappointed because they would have preferred to be on ETH. So a lot of community members voiced that opinion. And so they decided to take that grant and give it back to Polygon and announce that Utes were going to go to Ethereum. Now, this kind of ended up backfiring because in that announcement, in explaining more of the context of what Utes could expect, he kind of told them, like, look, guys, like I just gave all that money back. And so the next step for you guys is like just to go back to Ethereum or just to migrate to Ethereum. That was going to take some time. So I think these Utes holders that had been kind of like waiting for the next thing, like Utes 2, and what they heard is more waiting. And we're in a market where, waiting is opportunity risk. And so unfortunately, I think we're seeing that, and Utes took a big hit today. But I think like when you step back and look at this season 3, what he did, what the team at Degods did, I think there's some respectable factors here. Number one, they released new art. They worked on the art really hard. They had multiple versions. Frank has become a student of art. The team over there, they've been learning. They've been iterating. And ultimately, they provided this new art drop without diluting the tokens. And so I think like that's really respectable, number one. And it's also shows that they have a good pulse and understanding of like the market after seeing what happened with Azuki, who pulled 2 Ethereum from their holders only to drop, 20,000 new NFTs and dilute the ecosystem, take that money to make anime art, an anime series, whatever it is a lot of money. It didn't go back to the holders. It went to the team. The holders took the brunt of the downfall. What Degods did is they said for 333 dust, which is like 0.3 Ethereum, you can basically, quote, downgrade. And they use the term downgrade because they realized they overhyped things and they wanted to reset expectations. So, moving quickly, learning quickly, deciding quickly. I like to see that. And so they took this dust payment. If you chose to do the downgrade, you would get the new art and you could participate in this points parlor, which I'm going to go into a little bit. But that 333 dust, number one, it was optional. So if you didn't have it, you could wait. And if you waited, every 30 days, that cost was going to go down. So basically, you could wait it out and eventually get that art. But you wouldn't be able to participate in the points parlor until you paid the fee. Well, the thing is, you pay the fee, and they took that 333 dust, and they put it into this prize pool, essentially, for the holders. And that's what this points parlor is, which opened up today. And so I don't know if you guys have had a chance to check into that, but basically, they spent all this time collaborating with these sponsors. I think like the headline sponsor is Kraken NFT. They have a platform that probably nobody's using, so they want more users. So why not, collaborate with this strong NFT community? So basically, if you go onto this website for the points parlor and you've downgraded your DGOD, so you've paid the 333 dust, you can participate in basically like pack rips. And like you can use the points that these DGODs accumulate by staking. Again, all you had to do was hold and stake, and you earn these points.
Fact,
Now
you realize this is starting to sound like more confusing than Opepen when it just popped off, right? Like this is
this confusing? I mean,
it's just a lot, you know. It's just like this is the Degods community. Like this is a lot that just went down the last 2 days. Not your fault.
yeah, no, I mean like a lot.
I'm just saying it's just it's a ton of if this then that and I don't think that's what the community was about.
I just think that like the community is giving feedback that they don't really mean, and this is the greater NFT community. They say one thing, and but they really want something else. Now,
he was giving them for years, right? Like it has been years. He was giving them the Soho pitch, the fact that it's this community that's going to be traveling around and have the Soho house and have all these things. It gets the grant money, but then gives the grant money back and it gives them the point parlor. Like, I just think it falls a little, it's a lot. I don't know. I don't know if I have any good takes on this, except for the fact of like, I'm just noting that hearing you talk about this, knowing that it's a DeGod community, I'm like, it just dawned on me for the first time. I'm like, yeah, no wonder they're pissed. Like, am I wrong? Board, settle the debate. What do you think? The voice of reason.
It's all perspective, you know? So, Board, are you understanding the mechanics of what's been rolled out here basically today with the points parlor?
Yes, I did spend 3,000 points and I won like 5 dust in a loot box, which, you know, it's not a loot box, it's not a raffle, but it is. And that's okay. I think when it comes to brand promotions, I think you got to lead into like the theme and the feeling and the vibe of your brand and make it connect, because the reality is like any NFT project can do giveaways and can do, you know, raffles. And like what makes this feel like more of a Degods version of that? And I think that a lot of people feel like this is off brand. Like, does giving away computers or a Tesla feel like a Degods appropriate, you know, use of the brand? Or should it be a trip to Bali? Should it be like a membership to Soho House for a year? Should it be like, Equinox membership so you can get buff and look cool? I think they kind of woven prizes in that made it feel thematically like closer to what people expect with the artwork. And I think they just, you know, they went for like whoever would give them cool stuff and free stuff, and they found sponsors that were easy. But to me, it sort of dilutes the brand ethos that they probably were thinking about. And I respect the fact they want to experiment and try things, and like they can change the prizes out over time. But I think you have this sequence of events where people have these expectations for where this big, like cool brand is going. And they're just feeling like maybe there are some misses that are over and over and over, and they're compounding, and it's creating a little bit of like FUD and disillusionment with the community.
So here's the thing, right? Like, here's the thing. Like, I don't need.
Hey, Faxx, you give the flowers. That was a fire take. He's talking about the prizes. Ford's talking about the prizes in the parlor are not on brand. No one's talking about that on Twitter right now. No one's saying anything like that. That's a great take.
It is a good take, you know, and this is why Ford's on here, because I've been listening to Discount Spaces and other forms of content here, you know, giving great takes every day. And I don't know if you heard this one, but like I asked Ford the other day, like, what's the deal? Like, what's the plan with this big account that you have? Like, now you're like an NFT DJ, whether you like it or not. You're posting about penguin pictures and all kinds of like art that people don't understand. And he had a good take. He was saying that he was thinking like he would be like the game show host of the X app, you know? So
I'm trying to create fun moments on the internet. That's the broad plan. Where that manifest, we'll see.
And I think that's something I did want to bring up on this pod, because I saw that in your Twitter bio. You know, it's like, it's purveyor of fun moments on the internet. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. The ringleader, the master of ceremonies.
Yeah. And that's always been something that's rang really true with you is like you follow that principle, I think, pretty clearly. Like you put your time into things that are worthwhile, and what's worthwhile to you is enjoying the moments, enjoying the time. Definitely impacted me and kind of how I look at engaging in things. So I appreciate you sharing that wisdom. When it comes to what's making you happiest right now, and I'm not even gonna just box it to Web3. Like, what is making board happiest right now? What is making up the best of your moments? And of course, I'm interested in Web3, but would love to kind of zoom out a little bit and allow you to cover every bit of life.
Ecto cooler penguins. I'll answer for them. Good ecto cooler penguins.
No, for real. I want to bring back ecto coolers, and I want my penguin to be on the high C box. That would be awesome. I don't want any royalties. I just want it to exist. But yeah, I mean, broadly speaking, but it applies to Web3. I find myself in a place in life where I really like highlighting interesting people. I operate as a pseudonym. Clearly, I don't have the ego where I need to have my face everywhere and be the most popular main character. But I like to elevate other cool people and interesting people. I mean, I think the whole Thread Guy saga was an example of that. Jack is an example of that. Like, if I can use my powers to basically like showcase individuals who are doing something interesting and that are living in a way that I respect or intrigues me, I want to do that. And so that's kind of like my strategy or my mission. What I'm figuring out now is how that can play out and like what I can do even outside of Twitter to make that happen. Because Twitter ultimately is a small universe. I know Elon wants to make it like the everything app and our brains will be connected to this thing. But like until that happens, I want to see how I can take this faceless character that I've built and use it to highlight other interesting people.
And it really resonates with your interview questions and the way you conduct yourself on spaces. Like you ask the great questions at the right time, and it doesn't surprise me. I couldn't have guessed that was your answer, but it doesn't surprise me that that's the motivation behind what you're about. So that's cool.
And I think this is also like, what intrigues you about Frank, right? Is like, okay, like this guy's trying to do something good. This guy's trying to build something. He's doing it in public. He's taking the heat. There's a lot of, good and bad, a lot of discussion about it. Like it's interesting. It's intriguing. And like, this is the kind of point that I was trying to make before is like, I think like we don't need Degods to like win us a fucking gift card to Amazon, like we don't need that, like it's fine. Like I think it's better than not having that. Like that's the way I saw it. Like, well, before you were just holding the NFT. Now by holding the NFT, you also can like win cool stuff. Like this is a value add. Like it's not something to FUD, in my opinion. The only thing though with the points parlor though, like as somebody who a year ago this time, was maybe more than that now, but somebody who participated in the Cool Cats game, quote Cool Cats game, and was like rolling these gosh, I don't even know what they were, like kind of like slot machines almost, to like basically earn milk and do these little quests. And I was doing these quests and my Cool Cats were worth like 10 Ethereum. By the time you're done doing these quests, and like the milk token has become worthless, and so has the Cool Cat. So there was like a little bit of like PTSD that I was experiencing here, and I was like, oh shit, because this is what happens, right? It's like you were holding this NFT, it did nothing, right? Like it just was cute. It was cute, and like you liked the people who held it, and like you were like, yeah, look at this one. This one's got a fucking hat. Oh, look at this one. This one's got a frog suit. Oh my god, it's got a frog suit, right? And then it became like, no, we're gonna make it a game, right? And then people hear game and they think of all these games that they've played in their life, and they go on this website. This isn't a freaking game. You push a button and it tells you how many like milk tokens yeah. Hazy Bees reminding us it was called Cooltopia. Sorry, I usually like delete from my memory these traumatic events. So like I forgot what it was called.
I'll give you a memory back. We talked on the phone one of the nights when you're in your Cooltopia rolling phases, and you were really upset that you tried to show all three of your kids this really cool egg, and they weren't excited at all. They turned around and thought you were a dork. And so that's when you knew it was just it didn't have the juice. It didn't have the fun. It wasn't a moment of great times.
Yeah, so like when I showed my kids, they were like, I was thinking, man, they're gonna be so pumped about this, right? And they like played it, they like rolled it for like 2 minutes, and we're like, all right, see ya, Dad. This game sucks, and they took off, and then like that was when we knew like that this was due. But the problem was that people then associated Cool Cats with this bogus game rollout.
Yeah, because it's what Board just hit on. It's off brand, or it becomes their brand. It eats their brand. So you're looking into the future right now, and that's like, if Degods gets known as the NFT where you can win a M2 MacBook Pro, then they did it to themselves. Sorry, like, I'm not putting bags here. I really am not. I want them to win, but they need to course correct on the brand. Go back to the Soho house, or create a new brand that gets more aligned on what the people want, because that's the reaction we're seeing right now. Is that art doesn't move the needle.
I mean, I was just gonna say, like, this is where I really appreciate Jack, in transparency time and building in public. Like, this is a guy who understands brand deeply and went to like design and art school, and yet he does not have the ego where he can't build in public, get feedback, and course correct in real time. What I see happening still with Frank and others, especially people who are a little bit younger, is they feel the need to collect feedback, then go off into a dark room and brainstorm, and then present their ideas to everybody. And either you love it or you hate it. And, we see where that's going. And I think like transparency time, everybody's got to do it. That's the new meta, transparency, because if your community gives you feedback and they're seeing what you're doing in real time, if you miss again, it's their fault too. They're along with you on the ride, and they're not going to hound you as badly if you're not going to take that mantle of like, I alone can like think of the best ideas and make you happy. So I think that's got to be like a really radical shift in how they operate to save this kind of falling knife that we're seeing tonight and probably for the rest of the week.
Yeah, and what Jack's a master at, and that, what people have to be prepared to do transparency time, or what they need to be prepared to be able to execute on, is reading consensus. Because I think, just like you said, building in public and with the air quotes is gathering feedback and then going off in a silo, as you mentioned. But what Jack really does is he'll throw out ideas on these threads, and then he just reads the room, whether people are into it, whether there's too many edits, too many iterations. And there was one point with Jack where he mentioned, he brought up the old saying that if you're trying to make a horse and you take too much feedback, you'll get a camel. And I think that's definitely, shown in the way he drops ideas. He'll put an idea out there, and it's not just if people take to it, it's if people take to it and they iterate on it, like, they V1.1 it appropriately. If people are trying to make V2s, V3s, and it's sprouting 3 heads, I think that's where he knows to pull the ripcord. Do you see any other skills with Jack Board in those transparency threads that you would call out?
I think that the biggest one is he's just put in a lot of reps. He's spent time presenting to top tier clients. He's put out a lot of work that no one's noticed. And I think that makes him fast to react, to read the room, as you said. And unfortunately, that's just not something you can learn overnight. You gotta put in the time. We saw that he celebrated his birthday, a few days ago. He's been working for over a decade. So like, he's just, not only does he have the experience, but he's got like a crazy memory. Like, he cites all the stuff from his past and like famous people that he has studied. So I think it's ultimately wisdom is the answer to that question, is he has wisdom, and wisdom comes with with hard work and time.
Yeah, so here's like the thing that ultimately I want to see happen. Okay, because again, points parlor, win stuff, okay. New art, fine, right? Like I never bought the Degods for the art. Like, no disrespect to Johnny or anybody on the team, but like it was never about the art. So like this new art, it's fresh, it's fun, it pops in the PFP like space, like it's bright. Like I like bright. Board likes bright. He's got ecto cooler green. I got bright red. Like it's fine. The real alpha is that Frank is a student of virality on the internet. And the Degods community is the most savage, active, and engaged community in the NFT space. The Bored Ape community, they are just tired. Okay? Like these other communities, a lot of them didn't make it. They didn't fucking make it, dude. The NFT is done. Degods still showing up. They have this loyalty, the live events. Again, IRL events all over the world. You want to make a friend, the friendship company, that's great. Maybe I don't have time for friends. You guys are my friends. Okay? When I'm not on this fucking podcast, I'm sorry. When I'm not on Twitter Spaces and fucking podcasting, I'm fucking working my ass off, and I have a fucking needy ass family. Like, dude, this is the truth. Okay? But for somebody out there that needs a friend, that's good. It's there. Those events are happening all over the place. I looked on the website today. Fucking bam, event. So it's all there. But all of this stuff, to me, is like ancillary, is secondary to this core concept of like content creation, growing on the internet. Again, visualize value. And Jack is like a master at virality, growing consensus on the internet, growing your brand on the internet. Degods too. So in my mind, it's like Frank and Jack, their careers and their, accounts and just like their influence grows. And the people who are like, part of that community go with them, and so feeding into the content creators, feeding into like just all of this. I feel like what was missed here is like the opportunity to nurture that, like nurture your content creators, like hold workshops or discussions about like that kind of thing. So I don't know if he's going to get around to that, but I can tell you when I tweet about Degod stuff, my freaking phone blows up, dude. So like there's something there. And I want to get your take on that, Board. Do you hear what I'm saying at all there?
I mean, I enjoyed the extra $14 you make off Twitter advertising for all the likes and impressions you got. But when you're in a subgroup and you find your niche and it makes it easy to find friends, I appreciate that. I think whenever I look for objects or like things outside myself to connect me with other people, I like it to have a little bit more substance. Maybe it's watches, maybe it's cars, maybe it's poker. The idea of like a collective group of people who like, JPEGs is a little tricky. With Opepen, the reason I dig it is it's specific to art, and it's teaching me a lot about art that I just don't know. Like I am not at all versed in that space, and for me, it's a nice way to learn something that I'm not familiar with. With most PFPs, I just don't really see what the community is about, and so like I don't want to hang out with people who are just talking about a thing that number goes up. That's a boring community group to be a part of for me.
Agreed. I agree with the sentiment of Opepen teaching more art topics and art premises. There's definitely ROI in that. Faxx, I hear you.
Let me ask you. Yesterday, you were like, "Oh, the floor of Degods is like 6.5." Let's get it be more bloodshed ahead. It's going to go down more. Why did you think that? What was your sentiment then? Now that that's materialized, what's your sentiment now?
I think there's just too many cracks in it right now, and I really am not trying to I'm not trying to FUD Degods or I don't wish it to go low. But to Board's point, number go up is boring, number go down is boring. I don't really care about the price movement. I do care about Frank. I do want Frank to win. I want Frank to kill it. I want Frank and Luca and Jack to be these guys that made it in Web3 and have really put their youth to good work. Mitch on the team made a comment to me once that something being a waste of youth, and it's always stuck with me. And I want to see Frank's youth. Frank, I have 10 years on Frank. I want to see Frank ball out like someone 10 years younger than me. He has so many years of risk that he can roll and he can really melt faces in weird, crazy ways. And like you say, he's a student of virality. So I do believe he can pull it off. I don't want to see that diluted. I don't want to see that downgraded. Yeah, for all intents and purposes, I wanna see him win. And I just think that vision is lost for this moment in time with this community, and there's cracks, and it's because things are confusing, and we should all take a lesson from it. Jack's Opepen has only gotten more and more airtight. He has the experience behind him, as Board has mentioned, as we all know. He has the experience, and he has this community that understands him, and we track him closely. Every single drop, we understand why. We extract the meaning. We tie in closer to the brand of Opepen. Jack has finessed CCO. CCO, I thought, was the dumbest topic of NFTs, but Jack has finessed it. And the problem with CCO is you have to inspire this community to follow and create along with you. And Jack's done it. And so that's why I'm so bullish on Jack. I'm bullish on the fact that the community and him have such a close relationship, so that the brand and the vision isn't too distracting. It's not confusing. It is very technical, and it is very, in principle confusing, but the vibe is easy to digest and easy to understand. And that's why I said that about Degods is there's just too many cracks in the story, and the stories need to get more dialed. And Luca Netz has done a great job with Pudgy Penguins and shipping physical products and shipping toys. People might think that might be a little silly, but on the Eastern Hemisphere, they are making a killing off selling IP into plushies. People are creating IP, they're selling plushies, and they're selling them off the shelf. So that's happening on the Eastern Hemisphere. The Western Hemisphere, not so much, but maybe it will, right? And Pudgy Penguins are focused on that, focused on retail, and it's clear. So
good take, kind of like you're saying, basically find your brand, find your purpose. Too many experiments, too many directions, too many cracks. So Board, as a brand new holder of Degods, entering the community, right in the middle of this falling knife, essentially getting wounded, maybe a little bit of dead god vibes before you downgrade it here into the new art. What would you like to see kind of from here? If you could advise, I guess, if for lack of a better term, Frank, if he asked you, what would you tell him?
I think he's taken some steps already, which is showcasing more of himself, his real self, doing more video content. I think listening, not just listening, but also asking for direct feedback and working things out in public. His thought process, as I said, transparency time, super key. Building trust is really important. And then I think, I hate the idea of a roadmap, but they're throwing a lot of stuff at the wall. And just be honest, is that the plan? Is it we're going to just experiment and see what sticks? Or do you guys have kind of this list of ideas you want to try out and bring people into it? it's an incredible community of holders. Who knows who's connected to who can get access to amazing prizes that'll go in the points parlor. Like, leverage your community members. I mean, you've seen that with the apes. Like, there are a million people in the ape community who like want to volunteer their talents. I think that, Frank basically, again, just like work on the ego a little bit, like let yourself get help, let yourself take advice. It's still your company. It's still your art. I mean, you can do what you want to do, but I think just open up a little bit more is the high level feedback I'd give him.
Fair enough. And I do think, like, before we move on this next topic, like, I think the bigger picture was leverage the community and all of the engagement and showing up that the community does in order to attract more sponsors. So, like, the more impactful the community is online, the more attractive it is for sponsors. The more you go in that direction, the better kinds of prizes and things that could potentially be won. So I think his idea was you hold a DGOT, and just for holding a DGOT and showing up and being active on the internet, you can win more and more cool things over time. So I get it. Ultimately, for me, it's one NFT. The point is, I want to see the guy from LA win. I want to see the young guy from the West Coast trying new stuff, breaking stuff, learning in public. It's interesting to me. I just want to see him win. That's why I'm supportive. So with that, let's go on to the next topic here. And that is, for people who may or may not be aware, Goodmonth Labs put forward an AIP 268. By the time this episode comes out, there might be a little bit more time left in the voting. And I don't necessarily want to go into the mechanics too much about that AIP, but I more wanted to have like a broad general discussion about the state of ApeCoin DAO, because it's such like a big initiative in the space and like our perspectives. So like, for example, here, Good and I were in the middle of this AIP process board. At what point you ran for the ApeCoin DAO special counsel. And so like, why I think it would be a good idea to like quickly give a brief discussion on what the AIP is. Good. Like, if you don't mind, go ahead and like run it down for us, for anybody who's listening and still has an opportunity to vote before the window closes. What are we trying to do here?
Yeah, so AIP 268 is all about talking to our listeners on the podcast and being able to solicit the AIPs that are up for vote. So not just ours in this one, but if this gets passed, we basically will have a rundown of what the AIPs are, and we'll give our takes on them. And so, what we've seen on this podcast is we give our takes on specific projects, how, we think about them. We've gotten feedback from our listeners that, listening to the podcast has helped them think a little bit differently. And we want to bring that same type of flavor to AIPs. And that really kind of derives from our desire to get closer to the ApeCoin DAO and really be a participant. Because we've been far away from it. And the hard part with that is there's so much information to consume. You have to follow the discussion forums. You then have to follow the voting proposals. You have to pop a Discord for the working groups. And you have to have all these conversations, follow the Twitter spaces leading up to the votes. And it's a lot of work. It's a full-time job. And we have the ability at Goodmonth Labs to staff that job and kind of glean that information and be a communication funnel for other people. And then there's some incentives for our listeners so that they can actually engage and earn ApeCoin to be involved, because we would be a distribution center for that. But the overall goal is to make this a scalable piece of tech that other media outlets could use. So imagine Thread Guy wants to talk about AIPs. He would have a place to point them that's branded for Thread Guy, and he would be able to give those analytics to ApeCoin DAO. And so if you want to read about that, it's you can read about that Snapshot. There's a YouTube video, which we'll also post. It can give you a little bit more digestible approach. But, I think the overall thing that I'd really like to talk about, Faxx, and get Board's opinion on as well is, this ApeCoin DAO, you know, at the worst of times, which is right now, when you look at the price of ApeCoin, is $1 billion fund. When Ape is ripping, you know, it's much more than $1 billion fund. So there's a lot of money that's able to be given out to creators, builders, what have you. And one of the big things about, you know, giving out this money that I think a lot of people aren't aware about is to keep ApeCoin DAO proliferating, make it ubiquitous, but do it in a decentralized manner. And the reason why it's important to have it decentralized is because it can swerve all of the legal regulation ambiguity that's going on right now in the space. So, you know, I'm not going to go into the Howey laws here, but essentially by giving grants and allowing people to advocate or build on behalf of ApeCoin DAO in a decentralized manner, it kind of allows this, you know, dream of decentralized autonomous organizations or DAOs to actually come to fruition. The hard part is getting your message through or your message across with the processes that are in place. And so, you know, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Like, I am a little bit deflated with the opportunity and the like hopefulness that I had for DAOs, and just going through this process was really good to go through this process to see just like where the gaps are and the type of people that engage with you at certain stages. And it's just it's going to be pretty hard for DAOs of this size to work effectively. And sadly, like, it has my brain kind of going back to the, you know, wouldn't it be great if people could apply for management school or director school and learn how businesses work, which just reverts us right back to Web 2, which has me a little bit sad boy, because the point of Web 3 is to break all those barriers. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different ways we can go with it. Don't want to be too much of a Debbie Downer on like the process, but I will say it's pretty wild that you could put together a business use case. It sits within this discussion forum for 7 days. It's really hard to get eyes to it because it involves reading, or it involves clicking on a YouTube link, or it involves, you know, getting up to speed on it. And then you have these debates on forums. And then you can solicit the forums in like Discord on these stages, but then, you know, nobody really wants to talk about something that's not going to vote. But then when it goes to vote, you only have a week, and then you have to solicit it. So as you can see, there's a lot of problems with it, but it's been a great lesson. And there's a solution out there for someone who wants to build a business to help like be a service provider for DAO proposals that can actually disperse the information and engage people. There's a tool out there for any entrepreneurs that want to build it.
Yeah, right. So like, we're in this unique position where we have distribution, we have a podcast, YouTube, good traction on the X app. We have a team that's bright, includes engineers, business development, like really sharp administrative, you know, team, and all of this. And like, for us, the work and time that we put into this, and then suddenly it's like up for vote, and it's like not that much time to really like socialize it and like, you know, basically make people really aware of what we're proposing. It's kind of like, man, like, imagine people who don't have these resources trying to go through this process. Like, it's just like, how can people get anything meaningful through? Like, it's almost like I regret trying to make it a dApp and building tech behind it that could later be scaled. Like, I almost think we should have just been like, hey, we're gonna like just like dance like monkeys on stage and say ApeCoin is cool, you know? Like, it would have been better, well received, you know. But that being said, like, we talked to Wabam on here, we talked to Bored Ape G on here. Like, we really like have a lot of respect for the people who are putting their time into this DAO. But like, ultimately right now, like, there's so much friction, and it's just like kind of a restrictive process. So I wanted to ask you, Bored, when you ran for special council for the ApeCoin. I mean, like, what was your experience like overall? Can you give us any like productive, constructive feedback that maybe somebody that's listening from the DAO could benefit from?
Yeah, I would say that it is very similar to politics in the United States, where if you're a politician who's running, you need to make sure that your largest donors are happy. And I say this like not in a way to bash ApeCoin DAO. It's really like DAOs in general. The nature of the beast is that you vote based on the number of tokens you hold, and there could be 1,000 people who individually vote for or against your cause, but it really comes down to what are the top 2, 3, 4, 5 whales care about, because they can make or break it. And so it's a lot of glad handing and shaking hands behind the scenes, and frankly, just getting consensus. Like in the case of Jack Butcher, he reads consensus. In the case of a DAO, you need to create consensus. And so you got to play a little bit of a politician, and no matter how good of a proposal you have, the uphill battle that you're unfortunately facing is that people are programmed to hoard ApeCoin in the treasury and not spend it. I would equate it to NIMBYism, not in my backyardism in like California. Like the reason houses here cost millions of dollars is because people don't want more houses built. And when you have that happen, the price of houses goes up. Well, if ApeCoin doesn't get spent, doesn't get given out, it goes up in value, or at least that's the perception. So I think you guys did everything right. It's an incredible proposal. I think you're deserving of the money and more. And I hope it works out for you. But ultimately, like, you have a plan, you have content that you can use for, other places. I would strongly recommend that anyone who is part of the ApeCoin ecosystem votes in favor of, your guys' proposal. You're great operators. You have a distribution platform. I think it would be net positive for ApeCoin, and I hope it works out. But I did want to share some of my constructive feedback around the overall architecture of ApeCoin that I think makes it a little bit challenging sometimes to navigate.
Yeah, that's fair. So good when you hear that, right? Like I think we put a lot of time into, thinking about like writing like a really like great proposal, having some nice graphics, like trying to like deliver the message of what we're trying to do. Should we have spent more of that time looking at like who's really like the top ApeCoin holders and spending that time trying to make an impression on them specifically?
Yeah, I mean, because the process is outlined, it's almost like, why not put more process in there? Why not just, say that something's something is under review and it's likely to pass, so there's a socialization period. I think that was the only blind spot going into this, is like you do the proposal, you sit in a discussion forum, and then it goes to review, and you're kind of sitting in the dark. And from our standpoint, and this is anybody who runs a business, if you don't have a sure bet that it's gonna be a real thing, then you're not going to allocate resources or time to socialize it. But really, I think what there needs to be is this like a 2-week socialization period where it's like, you're not up to vote, you are going to be up to vote, and so this is your 2 weeks to go socialize. And as a delegate too, right? Like they allow people to delegate votes. So if that is allowed in any DAO, then there should be some required delegate avenues or events where those delegates show up to Twitter Spaces, or they have to be present in something. So, I mean, much like as Board mentions it, politics in the United States, like you have to show up to Congress, you cast your vote, you have to be present, and that's your delegate. We have delegates, and they are Congress. So, yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated by this experience. I think one of the things from the Twitter Spaces, which was kind of weird, is people are like, oh, it's like 48 hours left to vote, but you have 6 days to vote. And they're like, yeah, so you're probably not going to make it this time. I'm like, well, it's like, it's a third of the window is still happening. It's just like people kind of have this down bad sentiment of like, well, hopefully you come back. It's like, oh, that's probably the sickness of me, is like, I'm going to be back every week. Like I'm not going to go away. So
This is where we differ right here. I'm like, dude, if these guys shoot it down, I'm over it. And you're like, oh no, man, we're gonna send another AIP next week. Now we know how this works. So I appreciate that take. I don't want to spend too much time on the topic, but I think like the consensus that we have on it is like, for what it's worth, right? Like our platform, our distribution, our network, our connections, our thoughts, our ideas, like they can bring value to the DAO. They can bring value to the process, to ApeCoin. And so can like a whole bunch of other people. And I think that's, when we're talking about decentralization, we're not talking about we're decentralizing it to 10 people. We're talking about like as many people that have resources, energy, and can bring value, right? Like, can they bring value? So it's like an assessment of, okay, like the value that the DAO is funding versus the value that, you could get out of this. And like, that's a little bit hard to appraise ultimately is I think the reality of it. But like, I think today when we're on the spaces, the other person, one of the other people who has the AIP up, it was like a mascot. And it was like, she is this artist and she has this cool like art that she wants to like, deliver to the DAO as a mascot. And they're talking about all of this like regulatory paperwork that she's got to do and these like copyright and all of this stuff. And she's like, I'd usually make Twitter headers. Like,
shout out to Annie. She was killing it, and I hope hers passes because like she's just making Discord stickers and because people vibe. I learned so much from this experience, man. I didn't know like on that Twitter Spaces there was so much sentiment for people needing Discord stickers. Like one of the people who hosted mentioned that they don't leave Discord servers because they don't want to lose their stickers from that server. I was like, how am I just now hearing about that's the stickiest thing I've ever seen? Not to mention they're called stickers. Like that is bullish.
Ford, I think we got an idea for your Ecto Cooler Penguin, bro. Discord sticker.
I think we gotta hit the Discord sticker raid.
It's surprisingly effective, man. Like cosmetics in video games work really well. They're worth nothing. They make you look cool. People will spend 100 hours to get them. I think you're onto something,
dude. It really just blew my mind, and I was just listening to them talk about stickers, and at one point, Annie was just like. You could hear in her voice, like, she's like, hey, fuck it, guys. Like, I'm making art and I'm shipping the stickers. Like, you can hear it in the point where she's like, I don't even care about the $5,000 anymore. I'm doing it and we're going to love it. And, shout out to the movers and shakers. Shout out to Annie. She killed it.
Yeah. So I think it's like, it's this weird thing where it's like, we were doing this, a lot of people were doing this for fun, but then suddenly it becomes real serious when you're dealing with like a DAO, you're talking about funding, you're talking about IP. It's like, okay, let's just ship the Discord stickers. I don't know. Who am I? Maybe that's why I'm not in charge over there, but with that, like we were running this date for a couple of hours. I absolutely, appreciate all the takes. Before we sign off here, I wanted to go back to board. First of all, I want to appreciate you as a steward, as a responsible whale in the Opepen community. It's been a pleasure to kind of watch this whole thing unfold, and that's really what happened here. We watched you kind of become the largest holder and then watched you operate. And that's kind of the cool thing about Web3. This is the cool thing about Web3, by virtue of appreciation of art, of having fun with your friends on the internet, we meet cool people like yourself who come and give us your time and your input. And so with that, before we sign off, board, do you have any kind of departing words for us here?
Well, I want to say thank you to you guys for having me on for the second time. Faxx, special shout out to you, man, for co-hosting the spaces with me every week. Talking about Opepen. I would say I've got things cooking. There's a couple of things that I can talk about publicly. One, of course, is, hey, Joy, if you're listening to this podcast and you have not looked at Opepen, which I think is incredibly unlikely, but if that is the case, literally tweet me, DM me. I will teach you about it. I will show you the way. It's super fun. You'll meet lots of cool people. The other thing that I wanted to put on people's radar is quietly for the last 12 months, I've been funding a small game studio, and we've been building a racing game, and it's a racing game that takes place on the Martian surface. It's called Rover Watch. And basically, it is going to be a Web3 game, but unlike most Web3 games, we're actually like putting the game live and you don't have to spend any money to play it. You can just see if you like it, and then maybe later we'll ask people for money. But if you go to metamars.org, you can play test. It's basically Mario Kart, but on Mars. So there's 30% less gravity, and it's a lot more difficult to drive. I want feedback. Like, this is an alpha. It's rusty. It works in a browser. It's best on PC. I want people to go to that game, try it, rip it apart, tell me why it sucks, tell me why I should stop making games. And all that feedback will be heard and hopefully implemented in our fixes. So that's my big ask of all your people.
How many boosts? Like, what's the boost landscape if you hit an ecto-cooler penguin in that Martian car? That's what.
There's killer plants, and you got to shoot the killer plants with your laser, and that gives you a rocket boost. The faster you go, the harder it is to stay under control. It's going to be fun when we actually get to Mars and do have like motorsports. It's going to be really dangerous, but very entertaining.
Oh, I love it, man. You leaked more alpha than I expected. This is bullish.
Thought of it in the last 15 seconds because I wanted something to plug. So I appreciate the opportunity.
And where can people find you, Board?
I run a small Twitter account called Board Elon Musk. And if you want the super degen NFT version, which you probably do because you're listening to this podcast, I also run Board Opepen. Fun fact, the Board Opepens Twitter account actually used to be my Board Ape account. And I had like my ape there, and that was my degen account, but I sold it and I switched it to Opepen once I became the largest whale. So that's where all my super hot takes are, is Board Opepen on Twitter.
Yeah, I think he like floored an ape and swept Opepen. That's what happened. Good. Any departing words for us here?
Man, it's been a fun week. You know, I think at the end of the day, this week is why being in Web3 is amazing, because like there isn't a lot going on in the world outside of our bubble, but our bubble is popping. So, Board, thank you so much for popping on the pod this week and talking about all the things. I mean, like, I didn't expect to go as deep into Faxx's Degod cope as we did. But I appreciate you facilitating that, and thank you for being, as Faxx said, the steward of Opepen. We'll see you out there in space.
Sounds good, guys. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, with that, that's another episode of Never Fade the NFT podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Never Fade NFT. Subscribe to our YouTube. Like, comment, follow me at Faxx_ETH. Follow Goodmonth ETH, and our producer at Hazel B. Jordan on the X app, I should say. Hazy B, we're going to have to change it up. All the branding up to X app. So with that, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate the support. See you next time.
That's a bad bet if the bags check less. About to burn back to back, flipping not cheap when that Jenny duh hits. That's the race to 250 in the world, and you chose to sleep. That's a bad bet if you wake up checkless. No more people without bags.